Yeah, I hope that you hearing me. This is the future, all about cybersecurity. Talking about the hackers, I'm just trying to warn you. From the one and only legend, the cyber informer. Hey, yeah, this is the cyber reformer. This is the cyber reformer. Let's go.
It's time for the Cybersecurity Business Connect and Protect Central Coast Q&A video. I am Michael Tremblett, the Cyber Informer, at cyber_informer on Twitter. Recently, I've been asked about some of the hacks we've had to clean up and ones that we've been asked to engage in. Today, we'll take a step back to raise awareness of a number of different case studies that Loyal IT and I have been involved with in 2021. This is aimed at raising awareness that attacks can come from many different places. Let's go. These are the case studies we'll have a look at in this video. External penetration test. How I was able to fully compromise a network from the outside. Malicious Insider to gain full control of a network. We were called by a business whose IT provider went AWOL, and we were asked to fix a server problem without any administrator access. We needed to hack the network in order to achieve this. A number of mistakes were made by the IT provider, which allowed us to hack the network in less than 30 minutes. Ransomware. We've talked about this on the podcast, and I'll retell the story with a number of visual aids. Hacking using Microsoft Word. We've looked at this before in the informational video about macro security, but it's apropos to discuss again in this video. Identity theft. We'll talk about how Anna's identity was stolen from a more technical viewpoint. You can listen to her story in podcast episode 6, Anna's Identity Theft. And we'll wrap up with a user password recovery where we were asked to confirm that a user had not changed their password when they were asked not to. As proof, we were not supplied the password, so I was able to use some hacking techniques to reveal the password. There are some really interesting topics here, so let's get started. External penetration test case study. I was on an engagement where I was asked to see if there were any weaknesses in a setup at a home for a business owner who ran their business from home. I found they had a NAS device, that is a network-attached storage device, typically used for backup, which was accessible from the internet. I started trying to guess passwords. I was able to gain access because they were using a weak password. Sophie23. Part of the hacker's playbook is covering your tracks, so I went into the logs to see if there was any information in them. When I looked at the logs, I was stunned to see there were no less than 4 current attacks on the NAS device by hackers attempting to guess the password. As the engagement said, we needed to see how vulnerable they were, so I was able to use a tunneling technique to move through the NAS and into their internal network where I found their router. Using the same username and password combination, I was able to access their router. The tunneling technique is limited, so opening up other avenues into the network is important to fully compromising the network. Their router supported virtual private network technology, so I set up a virtual private network connection and connected that way. I used the same username and password combination, so if they did find this VPN connection, they may have thought they set it up or it was on by default. This allowed me more flexibility on the network. I could run scans and exfiltrate data. As this was a home, they had multiple Google devices on their network. I could see things like upstairs lounge speaker, downstairs main light switch, and back patio speaker, among other devices like a Mac and a TV. This gave me a good idea of how their house was laid out. The most critical thing was that they had copies of their personally identifiable information documents stored on the NAS device. This had bills, which showed their address, insurance and registration documentation, which showed their vehicle's license plate, and I came across bank statements and copies of birth certificates. This information can be used to steal your identity. They were unaware of their weakness, and it was a family member who knew a little bit about IT who set up their network. They didn't know the NAS device was accessible on the internet and asked me why this happened. There is a technology called UPnP, which is Universal Plug and Play. This takes the configuration of making devices accessible from the internet. This was developed by Microsoft for use with their gaming consoles to make connectivity easier for those people with Xboxes. Sadly, it can also open security holes in networks simply by having the technology turned on the router and turned on individual devices. This is frequently found as a default setting. I've heard this referred to as the tyranny of the default. Default settings are typically chosen to make it easier for end users, but it can lead to security holes, such as the one here, that led to a full compromise of their network and data. The Malicious Insider. This is a case study about Loyal IT being asked to hack into a malfunctioning network. In this engagement, we placed ourselves in a position as a malicious insider. We needed to gain full control of a network with no prior knowledge except for the user password that we were provided. Ultimately, this is the position a malicious insider would be in. As mentioned in the intro, the problem was we were called by a business whose IT provider went AWOL, and we were asked to fix a server problem without any administrator access. We had a user account on the network, but nothing else. We needed to hack the network in order to gain full administrative access to the network. This was made easier because the IT provider had made a number of mistakes which allowed us to hack the network in less than 30 minutes. Brendan Lewis, Loyal IT's operations manager, and I took up the challenge. The business gave us access to a workstation, and we were able to find the server had changed addresses on the network. This can happen if an update goes wrong or some other problems on the server. We logged in and found the link to the server was broken. We scanned the network and found that the server was operating on a different IP address. So all we needed to do was change that IP address back to the correct address and the server would be operational again. It wasn't as easy as that because the business did not have the administrator password. And as mentioned, their normal IT support was MIA. Given the little bit of access we had, we could see an immediate mistake. The mapped drives back to the server were broken, but connecting using the administrator account. This is a huge no-no. This meant that in normal circumstances, if malware were downloaded, it could spread with ease around the network. But what this also meant was that the workstation had the administrator credentials loaded into it, which we needed to extract. There's a lovely product from Nursoft, who provide a large number of forensics products for free, called Credentials File View. In the right circumstances, it can reveal all passwords saved on that computer. All you need is local admin access and the user's password. We discussed admin user access versus standard user access in the last video. We had both local admin access and the user's password. When we ran this program, it revealed the administrator password. This password was probably guessable with a little effort because it incorporated the business name and year, but it would not have been on a password list hackers normally use, so it was unlikely we would have been able to guess the password quickly. Check out our Q&A video, What Password Should I Use?, as to password best practices. With the administrator password in hand, we could now perform administrative actions on the network. However, we couldn't access the server via remote desktop, which is by far the easiest way to manage the server to update its network connection IP address. Some of the purists will say that you can do this from the command line, but I like to have full GUI access to click on things. We used another tool which allowed us to make changes to the server without being on it. A great product Microsoft themselves provide called psexec. This allows you to run commands on a server. We had the admin details and psexec in hand. We could now remotely enable remote access to the server by updating some registry settings and disabling the firewall. Yes, you can do all this remotely. It's scary, isn't it? After entering the appropriate commands, we were able to gain access to the server and make the modifications for the business to work again. If we stop to think about it, what if we were black hat hackers and we had access to that workstation because someone opened the wrong email, or we were a malicious insider with a little tech knowledge? We were white hat hacking, and this network was cracked open in a matter of 30 minutes. All of their server data would have been there for the taking or ransoming. You need to ask yourself, are your IT providers keeping you secure, or are they opening up avenues for hackers to exploit? Ransomware case study. In this case study, I'll talk about the dreaded ransomware. It's important that you don't take the head in the sand approach to cybersecurity thinking that you won't be a target. Sadly, everyone is a target. We inherited this business from another IT company. They had insecure remote access and they didn't have a backup. I hope you're thinking, oh no, I know where this is going. And not, hey, that sounds like me. For 9 months, we were on them about securing themselves. But they wanted easy remote access into their business. And they felt $1,500 for a robust remote access and backup solution was too expensive. Sadly, one night they were hacked through the insecure remote access. The hackers deployed ransomware and asked them for payment in Bitcoin to the value of $10,000. After emailing back and forth with the hackers, they negotiated the ransom down to $1,000 worth of Bitcoin. As soon as they paid it, the hackers went silent. Not only did this small business lose $1,000, but they lost all of their data. Can you imagine waking up tomorrow and not having any of your business data? What would you do? This was the situation the business faced. Sadly, this meant they had to shut their doors. let their 5 employees go, and then attempt to start the business back up again from the garage. It's not just businesses that are targeted either. What about your personal data? Something that has no value to anyone else is my photos. But they have a great value to me. So if I woke up tomorrow and my photos were all gone and someone says I can give them back to you for $1,000, would I pay it? It would hurt, but you bet I would. What are your baby photos, holiday pics, or family photos worth to you? You need to be thinking of these things now before it's too late. Just in case you were wondering, I have 5 copies of my photos in backups, removable hard drives, in the cloud, and on separate computers. I'm not chancing anything with these images because they cannot be replaced. Do you have similar protections for your critical data? This is a demonstration of how easy it is to hack you using a Microsoft Word document. Most businesses use Microsoft Office as their chosen office productivity software. Macros make life a lot easier by automating repetitive tasks. Did you know hackers can send you documents with malicious macros in them to take control of your computer? This is a demonstration of exactly that. The macro I used here was executed manually. However, macros can be set to execute as soon as you open the document. Let's see how this works. You can see my hacking machine on the left and my victim machine on the right. I run the macro called evil macro. Notice on the left, I get a connection. There it is. I am now connected to the victim workstation and I'm free to browse the computer. I search through the My Documents folder, not much of interest here. I go to the C drive and I find a folder called My Secret Files. When I go into that, I can see a file called Passwords. I can then display them on the screen. That's a pretty basic demo, but it shows how simple it is for a hacker to gain access to your computer using a Microsoft Word macro and browse it, potentially finding confidential information. Now we'll talk a little bit about identity theft. I interviewed Anna Cruikshank from a fantastic Central Coast company, Aubrey Brown Lawyers, on the Cybersecurity Business Connect and Protect Central Coast podcast. Check out episode 6, Anna's Identity Theft. I won't retell the whole story now. It's best you listen to the podcast to understand what she is going through and to get some helpful tips on what to do to minimize the impact to your life should your identity be stolen. The summary of this story is that her identity was stolen due to a server hack. She has never had it officially confirmed, but it is believed to be as a result of a breach of Equifax, a credit reporting agency. Equifax has a large amount of personal information stored on their servers. They were breached due to a server that was not updated, which had a critical vulnerability in their website. This vulnerability was in a software product called Apache Struts, which is an open source development framework for creating enterprise Java applications that Equifax, along with thousands of other websites, use. The vulnerability was so bad, the hackers basically just walked straight in. The initial breach occurred on March 10, 2017, but the hackers didn't start doing anything until May 13. From May to July 2017, hackers accessed and exfiltrated databases containing personal information of hundreds of millions of people. Anna's details and her business partner's details were 2 of these records. She has had credit cards, loans, and phone contracts taken out in her name, all because her personal information was leaked by a multinational company. So the question is, are you doing enough to secure your personal data or your client's personal information so something like this does not happen to you? It's a fascinating listen. I highly recommend it. Go to loyalit.com.au/podcast and listen to episode 6. Penetration test. Hack a password. I was asked to find out what password a user was using. Management keeps a list of all user passwords and was certain this user had changed their password, but wanted evidence before confronting the user. They didn't tell me what the password was before I started the engagement. They gave me VPN access into the network and an administrator account, so I didn't have to hack my way in from the outside. This is typical of the different types of security testing. You start at different levels of access depending on the test you are performing. In this case, I could have accessed the server recovering a password hash and then performed a brute force or dictionary attack on the password. However, this can be time consuming to do so, especially if it is a long and complex password. In the Cybersecurity Academy, cybersecurity.loyalit.com.au, the video How to Guess a Password Part 1 gives you a rundown of how this type of password attack works. So in lieu of doing the password attack, I remotely deployed a program called PowerShell Empire. This drops an agent onto the workstation and I can issue commands remotely. They have antivirus running on the network, so in order to bypass the antivirus, which may have picked up Empire on the workstation, I deployed the software to a location that is commonly whitelisted by default. This not only includes antivirus programs, but application whitelisting programs as well. By default, it is common for C Windows System 32 spool drivers color to be whitelisted. This is something to do with Windows printing, so I gave it a shot. Remember, hacking is about trying different things. It's not a science. There is an art to it as well. I deployed the program to that location and it started reporting back. This meant it worked, and it bypassed the antivirus. Now I needed to extract the password from the computer's memory. There is a cool program called Mimikatz, which amongst other things can reveal passwords in memory, and it is part of the Empire software. However, I needed to do one more thing before the password would be revealed to me. It is a function of all recent versions of Windows, where Windows encrypts the password in memory. But in older versions of Windows, this was not the case. However, you can force Windows 10 to revert back to the old way. The old way is called wdigest. So I reverted the setting in Windows registry and waited. I needed to wait about 4 hours before the password was rewritten to memory. This was likely due to something that happened on the computer to force the password back into memory, likely someone locking their workstation, then re-entering the password to re-log in again. Here is a demonstration of how this works. I'm doing this from a Windows 10 computer for the demonstration's sake. These are all commands that I can run through Empire remotely from my hacking computer. I run Mimikatz. I elevate to the appropriate privileges on the computer. I run the command to see what passwords are in memory. You can see the password is null because it is using the new encrypted format for the username victim. I run the command to downgrade the storage of the password in memory. I log out and log in again. Now we run the same commands to see if we can see the password. Scroll to the top and we can see the username is victim, but now the password is shown on the screen. The password is summer20. Back in the beginning, if I had tried a dictionary attack to guess the password, it would have taken less time than getting the password this way, because in real life, I had to wait for an event to put the password back into memory. This password is actually listed in many hackers' word list dictionaries that are stored online, including the most used word list rocku.txt. Once I had the information I needed, I reverted back the settings and removed the Empire agent from the workstation without the user even knowing I was on their computer. I reported the password to management and they confirmed that was the password they were supposed to be using. Now, they didn't have to confront the user, but I did give them a warning about how weak that password was. What did we learn? There are many different attack vectors depending on the various scenarios. We've touched on 6 different scenarios, all of which could be prevented with increased security measures. Security is difficult. Your average IT provider, or mate who knows a little bit about computers, can leave security holes in your network you could drive a bus through. Implementing best practices we've discussed in previous videos will prevent all of these attacks. Given the right environment, hacking can be simple. Many attacks can be executed in minutes. Take the example of where we stepped in because the IT provider was unavailable. It took 30 minutes to fully compromise that network. Let's implement security measures to make the environment for hackers harder, preferably impossible. Thank you for joining me for a look at our hacking case studies. It's scary how many different attack vectors there are in any given environment. This is a timely reminder to get you thinking about your defenses. Don't forget you can contact me via email, Instagram, Facebook or Twitter. Also, check out the podcast at loyalit.com.au/podcast. Until next time, stay safe online.
Oh yeah, this is the Cyber Informer. Hackers, you going down like, oh yeah, this is the Cyber Informer. Hackers, you going down, yeah.